We are back on the Spin Room, and we're taking a break from the Mideast. Let's talk some U.S. politics. As Democrat candidates stump in Iowa, President Donald Trump in head-to-head polling is not only losing to Joe Biden, but some other top Democrat contenders as well. And in an interview with ABC's George Stephanopoulos, he said the numbers are all fake. But the real showstopper was when he said he'd listen if, for example, foreign countries offered up dirt on his political rivals.
Your campaign this time around, if foreigners, if Russia, if China, if someone else offers you information on an opponent, should they accept it or should they call the FBI?
I think maybe you do both. I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening. If somebody called from a country, Norway, we have information on your opponent. Oh, I think I'd want to hear it.
You want that kind of interference in our elections?
It's not an interference. They have information. I think I'd take it.
Okay, let's say hello to my guest from across the pond, Democratic strategist Bernard Whitman and Republican strategist Charles T. Moran. Thank you for coming on the show. Charles, let me start with you. Did the president just put a for sale sign on his forehead?
Absolutely not. The president was clear, saying that listening is just listening, listening is not acting, and he would call the FBI if there was something damaging in there. So he's following the chain of protocol. If there's any kind of for sale sign, it's basically what Hillary Clinton did in the last election, where, you know, lying and spying and paying for Russian lies, spreading it through all these government channels, paying millions of dollars for a dossier compiled by a foreigner, and then spreading it throughout the different government channels.
But Charles, doesn't the law say that? Charles, doesn't the law say that you're supposed to alert the authorities when a foreign country tries to intervene in elections? Isn't that the law?
Well, I don't know what again, just offering up information versus intervening in an election are two different things. And in this situation, President Trump did say he would let the FBI know, which is exactly what you're supposed to do, if there was going to be some sort of interference. So I don't see a conflict in the president's statement.
All right, Bernard, over to you. What do you think of this?
Yeah, that is completely shocking, Charles. It's disgusting, it's despicable, it's degrading to the office. He actually said, bring it on, baby, in this case, Norway, but more likely it would be China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, whoever. And this is exactly what he fomented during the 2016 campaign, when he basically called on WikiLeaks, called on Julian Assange, called on the Russians to leak stolen emails. This is sort of an outrageous set of behaviors by the president, but it is not at all surprising. It's completely in keeping with his character. He has besmirched the office. He has stained the country, and he's put a pox in the Republican Party, because none of the Republicans, including my colleague, will call him out on this. It's unbelievably outrageous.
Okay, but Bernard, does the president, this is a question to Bernard still, Bernard, does he have a point when he says that normal people don't immediately think about calling the FBI when proposed this Oppo research? I mean, it's not something you think about, especially an inexperienced man like his son, Trump Jr.?
Okay, he's not an inexperienced person. He's the president of the United States.
I mean, his
20 years ago, Al Gore got a stolen briefing book and immediately reported it. I know, but I mean, the fact of the matter is, if foreign governments are basically helping to try to change, interfere, or otherwise destruct our elections, we as a country should say absolutely not. There's something, the line that we cannot cross to allow foreign governments to interfere in our elections. We're not talking about private citizens. We're talking about foreign governments, and here he is effectively calling on foreign governments to help him stay elected. It's unbelievable.
Charles, your response to that? Charles, your response to that? Foreign governments, he's calling on foreign governments to intervene.
The response to that is the biggest demonstration of the weakness in our electoral system is what Hillary Clinton did in the last election, with buying that information, disseminating it out, certain elements of the intelligence community populating this information, pushing it through the D.C. channels, Jim Comey taking that, filing several FISA warrants that should not have been issued, which then resulted into the Mueller investigation, which exonerated the president from any kind of foreign collusion whatsoever. If there's any demonstration of a for sale sign,
but not from obstruction of justice.
It is the success of Democrats. It is the Democrats successfully using foreign information to destabilize the trust of Americans in their governments. If there is anybody
Truthfully,
who
it wasn't that successful. It wasn't that successful.
Doubt in the minds. If anybody's, it's Democrat. It is Democrats who have put that doubt in Americans.
Okay, quick response. Quick response to Bernard. Quick response. Go ahead,
Charles,
Bernard.
you know that was originally shot, but that was originally shot by Republicans. That was originally shot by Republican operatives. And why are we relitigating an election that took place 2.5 years ago? We're talking about the current president of the United States. We're talking about the 2020 elections. We're talking about, after having learned so much, why can't the president step up and say, I don't want foreign governments to interfere in our elections? He has never admitted that they interfered to begin with, despite the fact that everybody in the entire country and world knows they did.
Okay, guys, I want to move on to our next topic.
President Trump is taking the hardest line on Russia and on China and on North Korea than any president. I mean, Barack Obama was sitting there telling the president of Russia that after his election, his re-election, he would have more flexibility. I mean, President Trump is the president who has stood up and had a hard line on these
response on this. Last response on this issue to Bernard. Just last response, quickly.
No, I mean, I think it's laughable on its face.
Okay, that was quick and short. Thank you very much. I want to move on to polling, head-to-head polls that were published by Quinnipiac University this week, showing that Joe Biden gets 53% to 40% for Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders as well over Trump, 51 to 42%. Also a pretty strong lead. Kamala Harris ahead of Trump, 49 to 41%. Elizabeth Warren tops Trump, 49 to 42%. Even Pete Buttigieg edges Trump, 47 to 42%. Charles, the president also spoke with ABC about this bad polling that he says is poll numbers are made up, quote, made up. You know, when the numbers are good, he'll embrace those numbers, won't he?
These numbers are a lot of see this reflection we saw in 2016. I mean, the polls consistently had the generic Democrat leading in the last election. They had Hillary Clinton leading in the last election. I think there's a lot of doubt in the minds of Americans about polls. And again, if the polls had been right, Hillary Clinton would have won the Electoral College by a landslide. So I think President Trump has the ability to, question whether or not some of these public polls, especially right now, there's so much focus on Democratic polls because they have so many candidates that they're putting all this stock in trying to even just get into a debate. So I understand why this, and once again, the polls are a snapshot in time, and we know that when President Trump is focused on one candidate, he can unleash a juggernaut of an election. Right now, there's 28 candidates. It's really, you're talking apples and oranges.
Bernard, a fair point. This early on, does the president have to be so worried about these numbers?
I do agree with Charles on that. I would never count Donald Trump out. 2.5 years ago, all my friends are like, he could never win. I said he is the Republican nominee. He's got a 50-50 shot of winning. As an incumbent, he probably has a 55% chance of winning just because of the power of the incumbency. But these poll numbers spell a disastrous start for Donald Trump. I mean, the most amazing thing to me is that he's actually losing by 5 points to Cory Booker, who can't even get on the debate stage in the Democratic primary. He's losing to Joe Biden by 13 points. He's losing independents to Joe Biden by 30 points. He carried independents by 4 points last time. He's underwater by 26 points with women. Every single Democratic candidate that was tested, 6 of them beat him squarely head-to-head. It is a rough start for him. He's got an approval rating consistently across almost every single poll of 42%. He can't get more than that right now, but it's a long way. We're halfway to Iowa and then 17 months to the election. It's a long way off. But he starts from a terrible position of weakness. Let's take a closer look at the Democrats and look at some polls. The RCP average nationally giving Joe Biden a massive lead over Bernie Sanders, 32.8 to 16.8 respectively, and Elizabeth Warren in third place there with 9.8%, pretty far behind. And if we look at what's going on in Iowa, where most of the candidates are currently, similar picture, but Biden has a much smaller lead, 23.8 to 18.8 that Sanders has, and Pete Buttigieg there just behind Sanders with 12%. I'll ask you both the same question. Charles, start with you. What strikes you as most interesting in these numbers? Is it the fact that Biden still has such a strong lead, albeit much less in Iowa, or Elizabeth Warren's a slow but very steady comeback, or maybe something completely different that I should be noticing?
I mean, every month there's going to be a fluctuation in the Democratic candidates. clearly Joe Biden has got the institutional name. He's known not only from being vice president for 8 years, but having been a senator before that. Also his previous 2 failed runs for president of the United States. So, I mean, at this point, I think that Joe Biden is clearly the front runner, and you're going to see a lot of movements from the candidates in the number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 position. There will be different flavors of the month, but you've got a broad panoply of candidates here representing every spectrum of the, you know, the moderate Democrat to the just obviously a socialist spectrum. So at this point, I think that, you know, there's going to be so much more movement within these Democratic rankings. And I don't necessarily think that all of the, you know, all the supporters are going to end up backing the eventual nominee just because of the dynamics and the success of President Trump's 3 years now as president of the United States.
Bernard, what's your take on this?
I mean, the most exciting thing for me is the breakout candidate of this cycle so far is Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Dakota. He is unassuming, he's approachable, he's relatable, and I always say for a guy who speaks 7 languages, he's incredibly plain-spoken. If you look at the numbers, Biden has nowhere to go but down, and he will continue to go down, although I think he's going to run a strong campaign through the finish, even if he's not the eventual nominee. Sanders' campaign is starting to flame out. Elizabeth Warren, who a colleague of mine warned me months ago, do not discount her, is finally coming up. All her policies, she's got a policy for that, is starting to play out as people are taking more and more close attention to the race. I think Sanders is going to fall. I think Warren is going to go up. I think Buttigieg is going to go up. And the real question is going to be, who is going to be the 3rd, 4th, 5th place finishers?
Right.
One thing that's important to understand in Iowa is you have to cross a 15% threshold to get any delegates. So someone could get 1st place, 2nd place, 3rd place. If they don't get 15%, then the top winner could take all of the delegates. And I think it's interesting to note that from the last 11 Democratic presidential nomination cycles dating back to 76, 9 of the final winners have won in Iowa. I think that conventional wisdom is not necessarily going to carry through this time, but whoever gets out in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th position is going to get a lot of fundraising support, and those who fall 12th, 13th, 14th are going to see their fundraising numbers and all the social chatter dry up.
Okay, we just got 2 minutes left. A quick question to both of you on foreign policy, actually, because Bernard, he just mentioned Pete Buttigieg as one of his, I guess, the rising star that people should pay attention to. And Buttigieg pledged this week, Charles, that the annexation of West Bank settlements by Israel would be met with cuts in U.S. aid to Israel if he's elected. Who is he trying to court here?
I think he's trying to court left-wing Palestinian activists within the Democratic Party. Mayor Pete has this very interesting dichotomy of being this very standard issue, non-threatening gay white man running in a field of candidates in a Democratic Party that is hungry for younger, fresh, diverse, both in gender and in ethnicity faces. So I think Mayor Pete is really trying to break out of the mold that he's going to invariably be placed in to run. And
Bernard, what's your take on that statement from Mayor Pete?
You know, I think he is trying to cover his left flank, but the thing that excites me about Mayor Pete is in an era where all the energy seems to be coming from the left, he's a moderate, he's a pragmatic, he's the mayor of a very small Midwestern city. I think he brings sort of a clear-minded focus to the race, someone who's unflappable, someone who could stand up to Donald Trump. And look, the fact is he's going to have to get up to speed on foreign policy just as Barack Obama did,
right.
And unfortunately as Donald Trump has failed to do. But I think Mayor Pete is someone to watch significantly and brings a fresh face. And the fact that he happens to be openly gay is sort of the least interesting thing about him.
That's all the time we have. Thank you very much. Definitely heating up the race. We have to keep an eye on it. Thank you very much to Charles and Bernard for coming on the show. Appreciate it. That's it.